All right, we're kicking off today's conversion show with John Gross from Fat Earth Media. They are a Austin-based creative performance marketing agency with a soft spot for mission-driven brands. Welcome to the show, John.
Hey, Eric, thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to talk today.
So before the show here, John and I were kind of rapping, and what we thought would be great today is really talk about, how important trust is to conversion, and how your brand identity and investing in your brand eases the burden for convincing someone to purchase. And especially working with mission driven brands, there's obviously a natural story to be told there. So with that, we're welcoming John here. As we introduce the brand and the brand story, we were discussing how it really starts. It's something that people first have an experience with a brand, probably at the point of marketing off-site. And when you think conversion, you don't necessarily think brand, but in this case, you have to be able to trust a brand to be able to buy from them. So what's your feeling when it comes to conversion and brand present day and the trends you're seeing?
Yeah, I think it's something that isn't rarely talked about. When we hear, conversion conversations, people are usually go right into on-site tactics, move this button, change this color, do this upsell. And those are all are amazing. And I'm not saying that they don't work really well, but often we don't think about brand and the impact that you can have on a customer way before they get to your website. You hinted a little bit about that mission-driven brands. And I think it's even more important in that particular category. One thing that we see a lot in quote unquote mission-driven communities is that it feels a little bit greenwash. You've got this idea that we're going to donate some money to something. We're going to plant a tree. Well, that's not really inherent to your community, or it's not really inherent or default to your mission. Then maybe sometimes that rings a little bit false. So for any brand, really, in order to really make sure that conversion is something that is always going to be strong for you, I think investing in that brand and investing in that storytelling in an effective way is really important, because you can build that trust through the ads, through all these multiple touch points. And then when the customer actually gets to your website, they're not necessarily needing to be sold on who you are, what you do, because they already know that. And I think what we see across the market, and Eric, we were talking a little bit about it, is particularly when it comes to like ad creative in the performance marketing space, you're typically left with one of two options. Either you work with, an agency that really just focuses on direct response ads. You're going to get very quick and dirty assets. When you look at your ads library, you're going to see a lot of, USP testing, but they're just done in a very quick way. And then the other side, you're working with a big production house, and they're going to, build you a very expensive but beautiful video, but maybe it doesn't really work in channel. I think there's a huge opportunity to think about performance marketing, to think about direct response advertising and brand, and really think about how it relates to your conversion. And I think each particular company or brand is going to need to calibrate that combination of direct response and brand in a way that really works for them. So take the time to build your funnel, to build your asset library in a way that's really comprehensive. So you're going to have upper funnel assets. You're going to run some videos. You're still definitely going to rely on UGC, but making sure that that's not an overwhelming or 100% of your ads library, so that you're not losing that brand awareness. And I think for certain types of product categories that could be seen as maybe commoditized, that's going to continue to have laws of diminishing returns. And unless you can really own the story and build trust, people are going to look at that product as a commodity. They're going to come to buy it on things that could potentially become a race to the bottom, like price, quality, shipping speed, things like that. But if you've got community, if you've got trust, if you've got brand recognition, you're going to be able to compete on those factors in a much more effective way. And I think people don't really think about their performance marketing assets as a strong indicator of conversion. And I think that, most companies should start to invest in brand before they think they need to. Right. And so if you're hitting kind of, scraping your most obvious audiences, if you wait until that really starts to fatigue, you may be a little bit too late to start laying the fundamentals of that brand awareness approach.
So what is that process? If I'm a mission-driven brand, and I love what you're saying, because, we talk about conversion copy, and there's so many, the thing about conversion rate optimization, like you mentioned, there's thousands of tactics that can be done. So you're not stepping on anyone's toes by saying, hey, we should focus on the brand messaging. That's just, it's one important aspect to build that first pillar of trust. So, and you mentioned, where do you start by analyzing a brand's mission and the story, and what are the components of it? Because you have, the product, you have the people behind it, et cetera.
Well, it depends on the company themselves, right? I think it has to do, where we would start this would really be, talking to the founders. Let's find out really where this came from and how they got to where they are. I think it also depends on how the mission impacted the original development of the product. And what I mean by that is, like, sometimes the mission itself isn't necessarily inherent to the product. So if you're selling cookware and you're donating money back to Feed America, for example, that's a really great thing to do, but it's not necessarily like ingrained in the product itself. So then how do you leverage that particular mission? Now, if you're selling recycled material, you're selling clothes that are, and I'm using some real examples, you're selling clothes that are patterned after ocean life. And for the sale of each item based on its pattern, you are giving money back to research for that particular animal. Let's say whale sharks, for example. That is much more inherently built into your product. And so the way that you're going to describe that mission is going to be a lot more in the forefront. And so I think what different companies need to do is really understand, again, how to calibrate their mission to their product. I've rarely seen, or actually never seen, a brand be able to just talk about their mission without talking about the quality of the product. But when and where and how quickly we get to the mission, I think is really dependent on the product itself and how the mission relates to the product on a more inherent level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know my brain's like kind of sparking with different, all these different brands I know and see, and you're talking about, I'm thinking fails and wins in terms of, you mentioned the whale shark. Like, to me, what would speak to me as a consumer is an actual dollar figure. Someone might say they do something, but if they say we donated $23,420 to this foundation, I would believe them more and want to partake in it.
Yeah.
What are some of the both the fails that people can avoid and wins that you've seen? Like, ideas as they calibrate.
Yeah, the biggest fail to avoid is thinking that you can launch a mediocre product and put a mission around it and think it's going to be very successful. Consumers are getting very clever to that. That's not, I think a lot of people are doing that and thinking that if you can build a product in a commoditized market and just leverage your mission. Like, people, I think people say that they vote with their wallets more often than they do. And you're going to need to develop really good products that people really want. And I think that can help with conversion, that can help with that first acquisition. But that mission really becomes what drives the community and what really drives loyalty. So where we have seen those fails is when you think that you can run ads or build a website or a product around what you give back and have neglected the product itself.
Yeah, I hear on that. It's like, in any market, the wolves will circle around because they see an opportunity to make money and they're going to exploit that. Obviously the Tom's shoes, the Bombas socks, they've made it to that. Everyone wants to be that, so there might be some falsehood behind what they're driving. One thought I had is the word mission can be generalized in a sense of, for example, Solly from Bomb Tech was on just yesterday, and it's fresh in my mind talking about Solly. His mission was to build the best driver for golf. Now, when I hear, you have a soft spot for mission-driven brands, I'm thinking doing good, like there's a good cause behind it.
Mhm.
Would you consider a mission a cause for someone trying to build the best product for their customers? Or is that a different, would you put them in the same?
In this context, I think they're different. I think when we interview potential clients, we take all that into consideration. And people who are trying to actually accomplish something important in their vertical, we do consider that to be very noble, right? And so I would say Sully from Bomb Tech, like trying to actually accomplish that is a really great goal. I think it's a little bit different when we say mission driven. We're talking a little bit more about some type of philanthropic or environmental impact that goes a little bit beyond just the bottom line. But we don't work with just mission driven companies. And I think like what you see is what and we talk about the wins part of this, and what you see cross over from someone like Sully and then a brand who maybe has a little bit more of an environmental type of mission, for example, is the passion for the end goal. And I think like that is something that you can really build a brand and vision around. And so if you've got that and you've got a founding team who believes in the outcome, right? I think that is probably the most important thing. And that allows you to have vision. It allows you to have passion. It allows you to get people rallied around you, not only internally, but also your customers. And I'm sure Sully, I don't know his brand that well. I am familiar with it peripherally, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who have bought 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 generations of his products because he actually is trying to build the best golf equipment, and they can get behind that and they continue to invest their money because because they know what he's trying to do is actually impactful to their, I would say hobby, but the golf community would probably roast me and say it's more of a lifestyle.
Well, you mentioned passion, and that is what really I think comes out in stories and what speaks to people. They see that someone is passionate behind something, whether it's building the best golf club or whether it's saving the whale sharks. How do you go about, it's probably part of your calibrating the mission. How do you go about taking that passion and creating conversion copy that works?
Yeah. I mean, from a tactical perspective, if there's someone internally at a company who is passionate, interview them, talk to them, see how they speak, right? They are, in a lot of times when they are a mission driven founder, or in this case, I am talking about the Sullys or the folks who are environmentally conscious. Talk to that person. If they're not full of it and they actually built this product in a way that is passionate, you're going to get all the conversion copy that you need. So record that, write those things down, catalog them, and start to test through them and find where their passion lines up with things like product reviews, right? We often go and look at Amazon and say, give me the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews, and find where those product efficiencies or deficiencies line up with the passions of the creator of the product, and then the passions of maybe the VIP or the most common purchasers, your subscriber base, your multi-touch, your customers who have bought multiple times. They are going to be passionate about the product, often in ways that you didn't necessarily understand, but almost always within buckets and within conceptual, ideas that you have thought about. And so I think as I don't know if we want to go too far into the agency side, but like most agencies, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of conflict between agencies and brands, and it doesn't really need to be that way. And I think one of the reasons is that like agencies, they think that they know everything and they don't build space and time to bring their brand partners in and have these conversations. The onboarding process for most of these projects is 30 minutes. Like that's crazy, right? You've got this person who just spent their entire life, building a business around golf clubs. I should be talking to Sully, for example, once a month and asking what he's seeing, what he's doing, what he's hearing. And we're never going to get to the good stuff and the little quick or the deeper wins if we're not really paying attention. And I think, Sully needs to be, I'm just using him as an example, needs to be paying attention to his customer. And as an agency or someone who's writing conversion copy or building assets, we need to be paying attention to that founder, because they're going to see things that we as advertisers don't necessarily see. Because I mean, how could we, right? We've been involved with these products, these brands for a year or two, but this is their life. And I think that's where you can really find some really amazing things to rally around.
When we talk about, hearing what you're saying, like when you invest into a brand as a company, what it really is you're investing in your customers. You're trying to understand what it is that they relate to your business. And in Solly's case, where you mentioned like once a month, he was constantly talking to his customers to get feedback to figure out how they can make the brand better.
Mhm.
And part of that storyline is what we were talking about is if you have figured out the story, and it's not just a story, it's a lifestyle of your brand. Is your brand engaged? And in the case of mission driven, they're engaged in, let's say saving the whale sharks. Are you then saying, okay, if that's it, we're actually going out and incorporating what goes into saving the whale sharks into that brand story?
Again, kind of going back to where the mission, how inherently related it is to the particular product. I think absolutely when you have a mission driven product, you should be leveraging your all of your communications to do more education and to continue to build that community, because those are the people who end up being massive word of mouth supporters and ambassadors for you. There's going to be, for every brand, some percentage of your community who wants to get involved on a deeper level. I think not everybody, right? It's not going to be a huge percentage of people. And if we build for this particular client, they have built some really in-depth, like scientific research in these flows in Klaviyo that go really deep. Now, we give most people the opportunity to opt out of that, because a lot of people do just want these leggings that look cool, right? And they don't actually want to know about the Latin name and all these kind of crazy things. But there are a group of people who do. And listening to those folks, giving them the type of information that they want and allowing them to be educated and, be ambassadors for your brand in a way that is more meaningful can have huge impacts, because all of a sudden now, instead of just us talking about it, there's a lot of other people speaking about it. And I think by giving people that second level of information can be really, really helpful for mission-driven companies.
You had mentioned user-generated content earlier as one example when we were talking. To me, what you're, this word of mouth, something to talk about. What's your viewpoint and approach to user-generated content?
Oh man, I could go on. We could use the rest of the time. So look, I think it's awesome, right? I mean, I'd be crazy if I didn't think that user-generated content is incredibly effective. I think if not done properly, it can actually dilute your brand quite quickly. And again, depending on the type of product, there are things that you can do even just from the aesthetic side to make sure that, you are branding it. Some UGC is most appropriate, just run totally raw. Some UGC should be edited. They're going to be art cards, transitions. We actually, for a lot of our clients, build like motion graphics libraries that we can add onto UGC. And the reason I'm talking about that is because if you have an ads library, for example, that's nothing but UGC, you're going to miss this brand awareness piece.
How do you do that at scale? Sorry to interrupt, but you just sparked something.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe not every asset is going to be edited, but if you think about the full funnel of your ads and you think about the full, view of what your ads library or your content library looks like, having some of those UGC assets have some branded elements in them is very effective for improving your brand awareness. So if you think about different types of product categories, beauty, I think, is a good example where, you're just using a product really quickly and people are like, oh, I really love the output that has. You hop on the website and you buy it. What experience did you have with that brand versus just with the product? And so I think that there are things that you can do and again, I think it really comes down to calibration. Like something you hear me talk about a lot is this is different for everybody. Where you land on the spectrum, it's not appropriate for every company to have the exact same approach. If you have an Amazon presence and a retail presence and an online presence, your necessity to focus on brand should be higher than somebody who is drop shipping or just doing a single SKU online, right? And so there's different considerations, but taking a percentage of your UGC and making sure that it tells the brand story is awesome. You're still getting that credibility from the third party creator, and you're leveraging it to actually, to get your brand across.
Are there any tools you might recommend for the audience for what you just described and to kind of editing your UGC?
I think it's a great question. I think the better question is around like, what is the methodology and the process for ensuring that gets done well? I'm a little less gung-ho on like tools for that and more gung-ho on building the strategy up front to understand like what you want to accomplish with your UGC. You know what I mean? And so I think like our designers are using, Adobe and different software that the standard kind of the standard editing for
Yeah.
video and photos. But in terms of getting it, I mean, we like Limanu is great. We also like Billo, but I think having, the brands that have good relationships with creators are the ones that are able to do that at scale.
I just feel like we're just so early on with UGC and leveraging it. As
Yeah. I think another thing too that brands overlook is like we audit a lot of accounts. I audit a lot of creative, and I see like UGC always talked about as a singular bucket, right? And it's often overlooked as something that we really need to analyze. And I go into ad accounts routinely, and you see wildly varying results from UGC assets. And I think it's because people think about UGC again as like a bucket that is all encompassing. And I think there's a few brands, there's a few agencies out there really taking a deeper look at that content. And if you start to think about, the safe listing or the white listing strategies, there's so much that you can uncover from not only the creator's avatar who you're pulling into your account, but also the type of content that they're producing. Right. There was a period of time we were working with a cookware company and we were getting tons of UGC for them. And we kept seeing wildly varying results. When we brought our creative team into the ad account and really started reviewing all the UGC assets with them on a weekly or biweekly basis, they were quickly able to describe and to define what it was about the UGC assets that were working so well. And when you say that out loud, it sounds obvious. Like, of course, you've got to analyze it. But I see people just lump UGC into a bucket and they say it works or it doesn't.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's so much nuance between one UGC video and the next. And you can test through so many different variables, messaging propositions, creator demos, personalities, and things like that. And I see a lot of brands give up quickly on UGC because they run 3 creators. The creators didn't resonate with their audience and they move on. I think that's kind of a shame. Like, you would never do that with a branded asset. You continue to test. And I think UGC is a place where if you're a brand listening to this and you haven't really thoroughly analyzed and articulated what works about your UGC, I think that's something you could go into your ad account right now and make a huge impact. And then once you're able to succinctly, describe what works, well, guess what? It makes it a whole lot easier to go out and get more of it. You can build a brief, you can send it out, and you can give people general guidelines on what to create for you.
Well, and clarifying UGC, are you tying in influencers to this? Are we talking about actual customers? And UGC, are we talking, a combination of not just, TikTok or Instagram? Are we talking reviews?
It could be.
How would you define it?
In this context, I was really thinking about video content that our customers or influencers are creating for us. I really like that. I think, reviews are obviously huge and we need to be getting that credibility of good reviews on a website. I think it was spoken about earlier on the podcast as well, but you go to a website with no reviews, you're wondering what's going on. I think that UGC can be incredibly important. And it's something that really needs to be automated.
And then are you, so understanding all the way through, you're suggesting you take, let's say, 5 solid pieces of user-generated content and splice that together as a brand creative with your own branded kind of transitions.
Yeah, I think absolutely.
Okay.
It's a very effective format type. Like, I want to be clear. Like, if you get a good piece of UGC and it's appropriate to run in its raw format, by all means do so. I don't think you need to stop there though. You can take multiple UGC assets and cut them into the storyboard that you want to see. And you can also cut in branded, transitions and motion graphics elements into those in order to accomplish both. You're accomplishing the third-party credibility and you're getting brand awareness from it and you're controlling the story. So there's a lot you can do with UGC. I think it's a much more complex and comprehensive content type than most people think of.
Well, it's one of those things as we talk about continuity from offsite marketing to on-site marketing, that's content that can live offsite and live on-site. especially as those visitors are clicking through on from any channel, whether it's a landing page, whether it's a banner, a pop-up, whether it's embedded into the site, it's carrying that experience through and that story all the way in.
Yeah, exactly.
That's sweet. Again, there's so many channels and so many like strategies. That's one right there that I think users can kind of take away and learn from. I just mentioned kind of the on-site experience, bringing this story through. As you work through this mission-driven branding exercise with clients and creating these offsite assets, how are you challenging your clients to not just use it in one channel? Are you working with them to kind of help tell that story on their website to their customers?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the storytelling on the website is something that's often overlooked, but is routine. It's sometimes the easiest thing to adjust, right? Even just like hero images or hero text. It's often, I find, like when a site isn't converting that well, that messaging is sometimes overcomplicated, doesn't get to the point, doesn't just say who we are and what we do. And I think there's a real opportunity to continue to test messaging and creative types through paid media and immediately apply those learnings back to landing pages. Those can be done in real optimization or A/B tests, but it can give you a real framework or real structure and a quicker way to move the needle on those copy tests.
Well, you mentioned earlier about agencies working with clients and only talking to them for like 30 minutes. As we look at growing a sustainable business, it is this holistic approach of like, look, it's not just offsite and then whatever happens on site is on site. It's one and the same. It's like this messaging offsite needs to carry over to the onsite. And then the third component of lifecycle marketing is once you either capture that email or close the sale, you have to follow through on the product being quality, the shipping experience being positive, the customer service experience being positive, because it's all tied together in the customer experience.
Yeah.
And
so I mean, you're hitting at something that I think is a shift in mindset that the D2C industry is going to need to embrace. I'll give you an example. Like people often ask me, what did Our Place do so well? What did Magic Spoon do so well? What is Graza doing so well today? And the answer is like, it's simple. It's kind of cheesy, but they're doing everything well. They understand their traffic. They understand their conversion. They understand their LTV. They understand where across that funnel they actually have limiting factors, and they know how to deploy tactics, strategies, and resources against those limiting factors to continue to improve. And I think for brands who have thought of Facebook as a business model and have never really focused on conversion or LTV, they struggled when iOS 14.5 hit. Like it was a big deal, right? I'm not saying that every brand, there's a lot of differences out there, but the brands who are really embracing the fundamental approach to marketing are the ones that are seeing the best results, right? And it's not that any of these individual channels can be done in a silo anymore. And if you're continuing to spend a lot of money without thinking about your on-site conversion, then it's silly. And I think like, as an agency partner, just as anecdotally, like we have had trouble convincing brands that they need to invest in certain areas of their business. And it always makes me scratch my head a little bit when you're spending $100,000 on Facebook ads per month, but you wouldn't want to invest a significant amount of money in fixing your website, right? Same thing with LTV. Like your list, your email marketing list is literally a financial asset. If you're not paying to grow it, or you're not putting the time and effort into growing it, into nurturing it, into treating it well, you're wasting a massive financial asset, and you're on this hamster wheel of acquisition that at some point is going to fatigue and is going to get harder and harder. And those earned and owned channels continue to become more and more important. Like we're starting to get our clients prepared now for Q4, particularly through the lens of lifecycle marketing. If you're not really starting to think about that right now, like your list growth, your acquisition, your pop-up acquisition, your campaign planning, really your segmentation. Like we see a lot of brands get to Q4, they try to do a bunch of blasts while they've really kind of not really treated their list correctly all year. And now the impact of those promos has been limited.
It comes down to audience.
Comes on
Right?
audience.
Your
Yeah,
customers
absolutely.
and the segments, just as email marketing is, focused on and has been building that email automation component with segments, with lists. We're just now introducing that to the on-site visitor,
Yeah.
starting to build that. The you know, I've been in the conversion space for 15 plus years, and I think the best answer to what you were describing there is that if you're at a dinner with friends or a happy hour or whatever, what's sexier to say, hey, I spent 100 grand on Facebook ads last month, or hey, I increased my conversion rate by 3% and made 10,000 extra dollars.
I'm totally with you. I mean, yeah, it's a bit of a flex. I met a guy the other day and he was telling me they just spent $21,000 a day. I was like, okay, I don't know what your MER. I have no idea if this is really working for you or not. And acquiring customers, we've seen a lot of brands get in trouble with a myopic view of acquiring customers at all costs. And I think that's kind of going away. And you're starting to see brands. It's great. I think it's really, I think it's a good thing. I think it allows us as agencies to slow down a little bit, to be more methodical, to be more consultative, and to say, look, we are not going to necessarily always go after driving quick hits of revenue in a way that risks your long-term health and your long-term growth. I think you see that a lot where brands are maybe partnered with the wrong venture capital folks. I've seen that happen a lot where you got these arbitrary top line revenue numbers that, by all means you have to hit this month, and you start making decisions for the brand that aren't very future proof. And I think we're starting to see a pivot and starting to see people run their businesses in a smarter way, and then continue to leverage these amazing direct to consumer and digital tactics that have always worked. I think there's I think you've been a party to these conversations over the last 12, 14 months that D2C is dead, right? And I think that's a bit crazy. I think there's a lot of brands who set themselves up to be in trouble as things get difficult, but the brands who have always taken a fundamentally well-run approach, a fundamentally comprehensive and complex approach to their business are doing fine. It might not be, 23 might not be the most exciting year for growth, but the brands who understand the fundamentals and who are doing the things that, Justuno focuses on around conversion and have a very well-run business that's thoughtful from first touch to 10th purchase are doing quite well.
John, I think you just summed up where the state of the market is perfectly right there. I mean, with customer acquisition costs where they are, to build a sustainable business, you have to be focused on the customer experience and building a model where your customers want to do business with you.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think also too, like there's a lot of work to be done in this industry around subscription, specifically like as a strategy. I see a lot of folks like, they tell us in audits and things that they have subscription. And when you dig in, really, it's just, the tech has been implemented. And I think there's so much that brands can be doing around actually marketing and driving results through their subscription base, A/B testing, flows, moments of delight, free gifts, really understanding the data, really figuring out when people are dropping off and getting in front of that churn. Subscription landing, talk about landing pages. So many companies out there or brands don't even have a dedicated landing page to talk to their clients or their customers about why they should subscribe. And there's a lot of products that just inherently aren't actually subscribable. They're better off on a membership or replenishment scheme, and trying to put them on a 30-day frequency because that's the out of the box, mechanism from your tech provider, I think is leaving a massive amount of revenue on the table.
2 weeks ago, I had John Roman from BattleBox on the show, and he just announced that he purchased it back. So he's back in the driver's seat, and he shared a tactic that on their checkout page they had a upsell of mystery box. Or right out of the gate there, he was able to shoot his AOV up by $49. And he talked about tactics, and he talked about, he talked about their business, and I asked him a question that I had read about that I thought was fascinating: is what goes into a box? How do you figure out what to put in the box? And they had this whole customer group that they work with to make sure every item in that box is awesome. And I was like, well, where's that story? He's like, oh, yeah, we should probably have that.
You probably have it. Yeah.
Have that story front and center.
I mean, and that's interesting. And like, the world of subscription boxes, I think those folks are doing a lot more around subscription strategy and really promoting it in a more complex and strategic way than the general D2C brand, right? If you go to, I'm just going to pick a category. Like if you're a protein bar, for example, and I'm just to make it easy, you got 31 bars. I know no one does, but you got 31 bars in your box. The expectation for my customer is that they're going to eat one bar a day. Well, first I'm expecting them to eat a snack every day, and then it's going to be just my snack, and they need it again in 31 days. It's not very thoughtful or not very intentional. So guys like John Roman from BattleBox, who I know, by the way, if they're missing some strategic aspects and that's really their core business is subscription, imagine how much room there is for improvement for brands who have a product that could be subscribed to, right? So it could be anyone in the CPG brand. And there's not to say there's not tons and tons of thriving subscription businesses, but there's a real opportunity for folks to get a bit more creative on the marketing side of, why should I subscribe to your product?
Yeah.
Convince me of that first, and then let's build the tech and the mechanisms to fulfill it.
Are there any agencies that specialize in that? Would be talk about adding channels and focus of agencies. In a market that's so young. I remember John was talking about how they're really trying to approach the negative connotation to subscription from what cable's done with Netflix. Like no one wants another subscription service. Everyone's trying to cut them back. So how do we change the view, the brand perception of subscription services?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're focusing on that a lot, like very heavily for our customers. We've got some tech partners that we're working really closely with to help them, actually develop their phase 2 strategic approach to subscription. I think like it has never been looked at like a channel. I think there's a real opportunity for folks to think about subscription as a strategy and as a channel and not as a tech implementation. That maybe sounds obvious to you and I, but I think the general market at large isn't really thinking about it like that. And there's a lot of implications to all of your marketing channels, email marketing, SMS marketing, paid advertisement, your website, that are going to be impacted by the decisions you make with how you set up your subscription, how you market it, what are the frequencies, and then to get even a little bit more complex, like what are we doing with loyalty? How is loyalty used as a lever to drive actions? I see it as a huge opportunity for brands. You talk about conversion, to increase conversion without having to do a discounted promotion.
Your third box, you get a special gift.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things, but think about it too. Like there's so many brands that do have very unique communities that we offer things that are a little bit more elevated than just monetary value or just free gifts. I love free gifting, by the way. But like, huge. Let's say you're in the food and beverage space. Are there cooking classes we can offer? Are there certain types of access you can get? Maybe that's a little complicated for most brands.
But like when you get your cooking box, they have access to like how to cook it online with a special.
Exactly.
It's all about experiential.
There's a lot of experiential things that we can do. I think with the advent of conversational messaging, SMS, a lot of things that Justuno is doing, there's so many places that we can start to build in these touch points and give our best customers a better experience with our brand. It doesn't just have to be points and tiers. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot more out there. Not to say I don't love points and tiers. I think they're great, and start where you can start. But over time, think about what does it look like? If someone's buying your product, 12 times a year, like what can we do with them and for them?
Is it safe to say that this industry is still somewhat out of the box? And there's
absolutely.
So
yeah.
Well, I mean, it'll be exciting to see what John does, because I know he has fresh ideas coming back in, and he shares the exact same viewpoint that you have, is that just like with e-commerce, just like with conversion and everything, we're still early into this market. E-commerce is still new. if you look at the age of retail, everything, it's still,
Yeah.
I don't know where it is post.
It's very new.
You know,
So we've been talking to our clients about, especially in the CPG space, what can we do to support your retail? And so we built these strategies around retail support advertising. And it dawned on me one day that like, well, dude, every ad ever has been retail support, right? Until direct to consumer and e-commerce was a thing, every advertisement that had ever been run in the history of mankind was intending to get you to go into a store and buy something. And so for us in the D2C space, having to kind of unlearn that everything is just to drive an immediate sale on your website is something that it takes some time to really unlearn that habit or unlearn that learning. But brands who are thinking about, when you talk about conversion too, like a lot of times we never really ask like, well, what is conversion? What is that KPI? Right. And if you're a lot of different types of products who have omni-channel distribution can leverage these really, really effective, amazing digital strategies to drive results that aren't necessarily just a purchase on their website. And I think that's a powerful topic and a powerful conversation, especially as ad costs get higher, especially as conversion does get harder. And I think there's a lot of advantages to thinking about going all the way back to creative and to brand. How are you setting up your ad account? How are you setting up your funnel? How are you calibrating your ad spend from brand awareness to, physical retail support to direct response? How are you leveraging UGC versus branded across all those different elements? How does the website support those additional activities? Is your website shifting over time? Like we've got a client who, when we first took them on, they're still using Justuno, by the way. They were 95% direct to consumer. Over time, their product made more sense to be in retail. Now they're in Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart nationwide, and it makes more sense for them to sell on Amazon and retail. But we're still leveraging paid media best practices to support those other channels because that team didn't say, oh, our direct to consumer sales are declining. We need to cut all these strategies off. They said, well, our direct to consumer sales might be declining. How can we pivot those to support the channels where things are working really well? And are really thinking about that as a much more comprehensive, holistic view. So their conversion on their website may be declining if you only look at it through that perspective, but their business is thriving. And there's no doubt that the paid media that we're driving to their website and then to Amazon or then to store locators is making a real impact on that foot traffic.
The store
right?
locator.
Store locator. Yeah.
Driving to the brick and mortar if they want to pick it up that day, communicate all that. John, you have such a well-rounded, broad view of the reality of retail today. I mean, we could talk for quite some time on this, but however, we unfortunately do need to finish today. I feel like we could do a secondary follow. I want to do a follow-up on subscription.
Oh yeah, that would be amazing.
That would be a fun one.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Maybe we can get John on too.
Let's do a roundtable. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's get some ideas around.
Great. Well, hey John, how can our visitors or listeners learn more about Fat Earth?
Yeah, check us out. Check our website, fatearth.com, fat-earth.com. We're around. We're pretty plugged into the industry. Check me out on LinkedIn, John Gross. Find the things I'm talking about there, or just reach out. We like to talk. This is what I do for a living. I love, in meetings and audits, just going through and unloading what a founder is going through and figuring out tactically what we can do or what they should be focusing on. Often having someone like me come in and take a look really quickly, just a fresh set of eyes, a new perspective might give you an idea whether we're going to work together or not. That's always helpful. Small industry. A lot of us know each other already. So that's no skin off my back to provide some value to folks.
Sometimes a fresh set of eyes is so valuable, just low hanging fruit. Well, thanks, John. Really appreciate it. That was fun stuff. And plenty of new episodes coming down the pipe here. So please subscribe to The Conversion Show. And I think we'll sign off for today. Thanks so much, John.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate you having me today.
All right, later.
Bye.